is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, Chuck Holton. Welcome to the Hot Zone. I, as you know, was just down on the U.S. southern border, and I got lots of great footage down there, and I haven't shown it all to you yet, so we're going to do that. But without further ado, I want to show you a package. You're going to get a sneak peek for a package that's airing on the Christian Broadcasting Network today or tomorrow. And so you'll get a look at that. And then I want to play an entire interview that I did with Ira Mehlman of the Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR. Really good stuff in this interview, so don't miss that. And we'll have more coming up later on in the week. Thanks for watching.
President Joe Biden's signing of executive orders continued Tuesday. The latest focus on easing migrant protection protocols, keeping more than 60,000 people waiting in Mexico for an asylum hearing. Many here couldn't be happier.
We came to the border because we thought they had canceled the MPP. We are all here waiting for Joe Biden to help us. All of us, Cubans, Hondurans, Guatemalans, we've been waiting for this day.
Afraid they'll miss a Biden amnesty declaration, many of these migrants have made the decision to try and cross illegally.
On the 21st, as soon as we saw Joe Biden was in office, we crossed the border to ask for asylum, but they threw us back into Mexico.
So we're right here on the middle of the international bridge between El Paso and Juarez, Mexico. You can see the barriers that they've got up here, which are different from the last time I was here, because they've had problems with migrants charging this bridge and trying to do like a bonsai charge and get across. So they have these panels of barbed wire with a forklift ready to push that into place and close off the bridge at a moment's notice. Up until this point, when migrants get caught by U.S. Border Patrol, most are immediately sent back, and the strain on the city of Juarez is evident as migrants try to survive here any way they can. This migrant center in Juarez has several hundred migrants from Guatemala, Honduras, Brazil, and Cuba. And they're seeing a big increase over the last several weeks since the inauguration as more migrants flood into this city, all hoping to get across into the United States.
What he is doing is creating a new crisis at the border, and one that will have a direct impact on both the national health crisis, because you cannot test everybody who comes across, and the national unemployment crisis, because all these people are going to need to work, or they're going to have to rely on public services provided by states that can barely keep their heads above water right now.
Visiting the border wall outside El Paso late one night, migrants could be seen moving toward a gap in the fence, hoping to sneak through. But this group was apprehended not by U.S. Border Patrol, but by Mexican National Guard troops, who are still operating under an agreement with the Trump administration to help curb irregular migration. After coming all the way from Central America, these Hondurans failed just a few feet from their objective. But with today's executive orders, very soon they may finally be successful.
We're ignoring the basic rules of nature, which is that you get more of what you subsidize and less of what you penalize.
From El Paso, Texas, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
So, folks, I've got Ira Mehlman. He's the media director for the Federation for American Immigration Reform with us today. And I wanted to ask him about how these changes in the immigration policy of the United States that Joe Biden is making with this flurry of executive orders will affect immigration in our country. So thank you for coming on, Ira. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
So tell me just what we're watching the president systematically dismantle the MPP, the Remain in Mexico policy that was instituted by his predecessor. What effect will that have on immigration in the United States?
What the administration is doing today is sending a very clear signal that it is time to make a rush for our border. The combination of all the executive orders that he's signing today and that he has signed since he became president indicates that the administration's position is, if you can get into the United States, we are going to allow you to remain here. And he's doing it at a time when he is dealing with other crises. The American public elected him to deal with the crisis of COVID and the economic fallout. And what he is doing is creating a new crisis at the border, and one that will have a direct impact on both the national health crisis, because you cannot test everybody who comes across, and the national unemployment crisis, because all these people are going to need to work, or they're going to have to rely on public services provided by states that can barely keep their heads above water right now.
How much does that cost the American taxpayer?
Well, it is going to cost billions and billions. We as a nation now spend about $135 billion every year to provide benefits and services to illegal aliens and their dependents. So I'm not sure anybody has calculated the increased costs, but it is certainly going to be significant. And as it comes at a time when you look around, particularly since most of these services are provided at the state and local level, you look around the country, many states are just teetering on the brink of financial disaster.
They are, without a doubt. Now, I just came from the border. I spent a week in El Paso and New Mexico, and I went out to the place where they stopped building on the fence. And I was there the day that they were directed to put everything down and go home, stop building. What we found were very large depots out in the desert with literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of tons. We estimate 280,000 tons of steel made into those 30-foot bollard fence panels. The one depot I flew my drone over had at least 6.5 miles worth of those fencing panels stacked up there waiting to be put in. These are purpose-built, bought and paid for, contracts awarded, and the workers were told to just put them down and go home. What do you think will become of all that material and all that tax money that's been spent out there in the desert?
Well, it's likely to be a sunk cost because these have already been contracted for. What you saw out there has already been paid for. So basically what it is saying to the American taxpayers is that all this money that was spent is going to go for naught. And the irony here is that as they are ceasing construction on the border wall to protect the security of the American people, Congress is moving ahead to build a security fence around the Capitol, which is, by the way, nobody's disputing after what happened last month that you do need protection at the Capitol. But the irony here is that Congress is protecting itself and saying to the American public, and the administration is saying to the American public, well, you're just going to have to fend for yourselves. We're going to waste a whole lot of money in the process.
How many of these Democratic senators and congressmen have said that walls don't work? There's no reason for us to build a wall on the southern border because walls don't work. And now they're building one around their own house. The irony is just nuclear at this point.
Right. And one other thing I would point out that a lot of these people, including Joe Biden when he was in the Senate, actually voted for authorizing the construction of the border fence. He voted for it. Chuck Schumer voted for it. Senator Barack Obama at the time voted for it. Senator Hillary Clinton voted for it. So there is a long history of Democrats voting for these protections, and now they are yielding to the far left radical fringe of their party and halting a border fence that is actually protecting the interests of the American people.
Oh yeah, no doubt about that. When it comes to the jobs that are being lost, well, you talked a little bit about the cost to the American public. Talk about the cost in national security, the risks that we face by not sealing up that southern border.
Well, look, I mean, most of the people who come across the border are not aiming to do any harm to this country. They're coming for very understandable reasons, but ones that we simply cannot allow people, en masse to ignore our laws because they're there to protect other interests of the American people. But along with the people who are just coming here because they want to take advantage of an opportunity to get into the United States, you have criminal cartels that are operating down there, the drug smugglers, the human traffickers, that are bringing people into the country. Now we have the added health crisis. If you're going to have millions of people crossing that border, it is going to be impossible to test people and quarantine people to save the security of the health security of the American people. So, and in addition to the COVID virus we've been dealing with for the past year, now we're seeing new strains that could be introduced to the country. So on every level, it makes absolutely no sense to open up that border now. And there is a caveat here. The administration is saying that some of these provisions are going to remain in place so long as we are dealing with the COVID crisis. Don't know how long they're intending that to stay in place, but at least they are acknowledging, at least tacitly, they're acknowledging that there are practical reasons to maintain these policies.
Well, so I've seen that Texas has filed lawsuits to try to stop the Biden administration from dismantling these policies en masse. What other things can Americans do to try to put pressure on the Biden administration to safeguard our country?
Well, look, I mean, the administration is new, that they're not facing immediate reelection, but there's an awful lot of members of Congress, all 435 members of the House and a third of the Senate, that is facing reelection in 2022. That cycle has already begun. We've seen in the past, there have been attempts to ram through policies for mass amnesty and to ignore open borders. And the American public has stood up and said, no, it forced Congress to back down. This happened under George W. Bush. It happened under Barack Obama. It is going to need, unfortunately, to happen again because the people in Washington don't seem to get the idea that the primary constituency for U.S. immigration policies is the American public. We are the primary constituency. It is there to protect and serve and benefit the American people. And if it's not, then they shouldn't be doing it.
So explain the issue of chain migration and how that'll be affected by an amnesty in the United States. You give amnesty to 14 million illegal immigrants. What effect does that have in terms of chain migration? How does that work?
Well, first, this is another issue. This is legislation that the administration is proposing before Congress, which is to grant amnesty to about 14.5 million people who are in the country illegally, including people who arrived here as recently as January 1st of this year. And under our legal immigration system, once all of these people move through the process, and it's going to be, I believe, an 8 to 13 year period for all of these people to get U.S. citizenship. Once that happens, then you now have about 14.5 million people who can start petitioning for a whole range of relatives. And by a whole range, I mean not just the immediate nuclear family, not just spouses and minor children, but a whole range of relatives, extended family members, aging parents, brothers and sisters, who then bring with them their spouses who petition for their siblings. And it just goes on and on. FAIR has estimated that the result of an amnesty over the next 10 to 20 years could be about 50 million people coming to the United States. So it is just unprecedented in scope.
50 million.
50, correct.
So the costs of that on the American taxpayer would be unsupportable. I mean, you're talking about what, $200 billion probably a year?
Oh, probably way more than that. Apparently, none of this matters in Washington. They just print money.
Print more.
Yeah. So, I mean, something is going to have to give at some point. But if you, just in the current political climate, nobody seems to be looking at anything long term. It's all about, what satisfies some pressure group right now.
Yeah, but $200 billion a year at the low end of the spectrum would make a $20 billion border fence seem like pocket change.
Right. And you have to remember the $200 billion, and it's probably higher than that, is a recurring cost. It is year after year after year. The $20 billion cost for construction of the border fence is a one-time cost. Obviously, there's maintenance, but it is a one-time cost. And by the way, I mean, the border fence is not the end-all and be-all of immigration enforcement. You have to have deterrence in this country. You have to make it clear to people that even if you can get into the United States illegally, and a lot of people, at least prior to COVID, flew into this country and overstayed their visas, and that's how they became aliens. But there have to be other measures in place that send a very, very clear signal to people: don't come to the United States illegally because you're not going to benefit. And that's the way we enforce all civil laws in this country. The Highway Patrol puts a few extra patrol cars out there. We all get the message, and take our foot off the gas. The IRS audits your neighbor's tax returns. You double check your tax return. That's the way civil law enforcement is always taking place. And that's what we have to apply to immigration enforcement as well.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on with us. Tell us about the Federation for American Immigration Reform, what you do, and how people can find out more about you.
Sure. I mean, we are a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and our primary mission is to represent the interests of the American public in immigration debate, because the American public is the primary constituency. And if people want to find out more about FAIR, they can go to our website, which is fairus.org. That's FAIRUS.org, fairus.org.
Folks, I recommend you check it out because they've got a lot of really good information with some really hard numbers that will give you ammunition to when you talk to people about this and help you understand the issue a lot better. It's a complicated and thorny issue down on the border. It always has been, but FAIR is doing a really good job at putting those numbers, codifying those numbers, and making them available to the U.S. public. So we appreciate what you do. Thank you very much. Ira, I appreciate you coming on.
Anytime. Thank you.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.